Welcome to the Collage Podcast, a production of Feed My Sheep. Feed My Sheep is a nonprofit in Temple, Texas that has a goal of feeding people that are hungry physically, spiritually, and emotionally. In this podcast, we discuss Scripture, and our hope is that you would be fed spiritually through the reading and discussing of His Word. We're glad you're here.
Hey, we want to welcome y'all back to a continuation, or if you're just now joining us for another episode of the Collage Podcast. So today we have in-house, we have Spencer, and we also have Bobby in here. We're taking up a discussion that we had started. It doesn't matter if you've heard the previous one or not. So what we're going to kind of talk about today is we've got Spencer and Bobby here, and we're going to look at several different things about how we define ourselves, and we're going to kind of go back and look at that, and then also how difficult it can be to try to navigate this thing called life when we are maybe having struggles within ourselves. So some of the things that come along with possibly mental illness, with depression, with these things that come into life, and try to navigate life. So first we're going to look at how hard it is to navigate this when you're not even living in your true definition, and then put on top of that how difficult it is when you're not fully functioning well, if you're in the midst of mental struggles, and then yet our society would then still point to us in those situations and say, you should be fine. You should be able to function. You should be able to do all these things. So interesting discussion. We're going to kind of look from there. And so, yeah, ready to begin?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, and so be patient with Spencer, because she is an oversharer, is what she said. That's how we were just talking about that. And so
Yes.
I guess that goes without saying for any person who is sitting here in front of a microphone doing this, that they all who are here suffer from oversharing. Because if you're speaking out there. So tell me on this, what would we be referring to, Spencer, when we said that sometimes we live out of a definition that is not truly what our definition is of our own self? What does that mean?
It means that somebody might have said something to you at some point in your life that made you believe that that was who you are, and then you went off and lived that.
Okay, fair. And in a positive sense, so give me a possible positive way that could be a good thing. Like somebody could define you in a way that it turned out to be positive. So tell me a positive way.
Well, people have told me that I'm very friendly.
Okay.
And so I feel like that's just made me friendly. Okay,
Okay.
I'm always friendly now.
That's
Well,
right.
not always, actually.
Man, you're such a good conversationalist.
Yeah.
And then you find ease into going into conversation.
Yeah.
So sometimes that can be a definition that would define, oh, you are so friendly. You are you're such a good artist. You're such a this. Sometimes you are so good at sports. Sometimes guys or young ladies hear that, and then, oh, I must be, and we live out of that definition. So we could say maybe it could manifest itself positively and how others identify us, and then we could look at that. So then just for point of reference, a negative definition of a person and how we could possibly live in that, what would be that?
I mean, anything negative. Oh, my brain is not working today. I'm so sorry.
Like if somebody said, but like, so I would say this.
I feel like you're asking me questions and it's making me really nervous.
No, I'm not asking.
Like I have
So
to come
we're
up
just-
with the right answer, so I'm like freezing up, like I don't know.
Okay, so like so in a young ladies, if somebody said, golly, you're fat. Okay, sometimes it makes people live in a way of their questioning their body shape and how they are put together.
I know, so I'm an oversharer, but growing up, my mom used to tell me that I talk too much. And
Okay.
so now I'm like, I talk too much, I must be an oversharer all the time. So I
Okay.
get really self-conscious about it.
No, and fair. So like this, let me ask you, I mean,
People
do you,
still tell me that. but-
and then Bobby, or both, so it's not just female on this side of it. Do you think a lot of people in the world are trying to live a life that is defined by others more than themselves? Is that a valid question?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's our natural inclination. So I think if we're believers, we're Christians, we would say the right answer is we should find our identity in Christ. We know that we're children of God. We're redeemed. We're all these things that God says we are. And that's where we want to find our identity, but it's so easy to get caught up in the people around us, the people that we can see and touch, the people that are in our face every day, to care what they think, which to an extent I would say is not a bad thing to care about what other people think entirely, but to find your identity in what other people say you are, what they want you to be, it can cause problems, and I think that we all fall victim to that sometimes.
Spencer, what do you think?
Yeah, true.
It is true, like in that, and we won't relish in this area, but it is so, I look at our little world that we deal with at Feed My Sheep, a lot of the people that we serve each day, society as we know them possibly can define them in a certain way. Okay, and look at them and go, and lack of a better term, like, homeless. And then insert whatever connotations that come with that. They must be addicted to this. They must be this. They must not want to work. They define in these ways, and then they live out of this definition that's really not them. You know, and so I see it every day, like why this is a topic that interests me is, and even maybe more so, a lot of the people we serve here, nobody even bothers to even put a definition on them. Like you could maybe reach a place in humanity that society doesn't even think you're even worthy of a definition anymore. You know, other than maybe bad. Okay, terrible, difficult way to live in it. So the definition, I would say, of how others define us, it has a big impact in our daily life. And I would agree, like with Bobby, what he said, and then we would look at this, and then I would also agree, everybody who will roll their eyes, because it's not that simplistic, but it is, that our true identity only lies within Christ. Roll our eyes now. Because a lot of people can go, yeah, okay, great, I got it, yep, I know, and I can do all things through Christ, okay, great, woohoo, yippee dippy. But not many people live in that definition at all, and that is truth there. So I'm not saying that, I'm not rolling my eyes, that is the truth, but that's a hard place to live. So we'd say, hey, hard for the people here to truly live in the definition of their worth and value, because nobody ever shows them that much at all. Hard to believe. So you would go out of that, and then like Spencer's story in the previous one, lived a chapter of her life maybe defined by negative words that somebody said to her. Okay, and so you'd go, in whatever, you go, I shouldn't do that, whatever. Okay, but we do as human beings. The other one that we're going to talk a little bit about is let's pretend you have a poor definition of yourself or perception of your own worth and value, and then layer on top of that you are struggling and don't even maybe even realize you're struggling with mental health issues. You know, because a lot of the people that I serve here wouldn't necessarily, because they haven't been diagnosed by a professional, even truly understand that what they consider reality is not truly the reality that they're called to live in, that they're not well. So like we had looked at our last one about a Vincent van Gogh, that he was mentally ill. His reality was reality to him, but to nobody else. And we would look at him and go, oh, he's mentally ill. And then look at these things and he didn't know that. So tell me, struggle, definition, tough. Mental illness, tell me what that is and how rampant it is in our world. What do you think?
Well, I think I finally have some things to say.
Yeah?
Because it's such a sensitive topic. I mean, when we get into mental health or individualism or expression or all that kind of stuff, it's funny actually because Pastor Austin at Vista Church was just talking about this on Sunday. And he talks about it a lot. I don't know if what church you got. You don't go there.
Oh, my son was there on
I've been to
Sunday.
Vista.
Okay, yeah. So you know who
Individualism.
Austin is? Yeah.
I know Austin. I knew
So-
Austin as a kid.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
That'd be a fun conversation.
Oh yeah, whole other conversation. That'd be another podcast.
No, but he talks about this kind of stuff a lot for some reason. He just seems to bring it up. And I kind of just disagree with him a lot on this. And I always feel like I have to go home and really think about it, pray about it. But I have mental health struggles. And I know a lot of people that do. I know Christians that think mental health is like almost taboo, like from the enemy, kind of demonic-ish sort of things. But as somebody that lives with it and as a Christian, it's really frustrating when people dismiss it so easily. And then also living with it in general and getting labeled by it all the time and how that affects you. Like when you think of somebody that has ADHD, how do you think of them? Like bouncing off the walls, all over the place, irresponsible decisions, can't focus, like getting in trouble all the time, right? Kinda?
Yeah, sometimes.
So I have ADHD, and for me, I was a really smart kid, pretty quiet, got really good grades, but was deemed airheady, like kind of just always daydreaming, kind of just not really, couldn't pay attention. And it kind of created itself in me as something like in my mind. So I don't know how to explain this, but that's something I've lived with and then wasn't diagnosed with because I didn't show the symptoms society might think you need to have this. And then also when I tell people that I have ADHD, they might not believe me because I'm not acting the way they might think somebody has ADHD would act.
Mhm.
Or like I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so when you think about somebody that has bipolar disorder, you think of somebody like Vincent van Gogh or somebody that might have been also, just lived this kind of crazy life, which I sort of did a little, but it's just, I don't know. It's hard to say. Now I'm losing my train of thought, but when you live with these things and then somebody tells you that they're not real, it's really frustrating.
Mhm.
And then when somebody says, like, when they bring God into it, it makes you feel like you can't talk about it because it's like you're making it all up. It's not an actual diagnosis, if that makes sense.
So when you talk about those things, or other people talk about those things, they get the impression that it's not real necessarily, or not a physical thing, that you should be able to help it. Kind of like you're not like praying hard enough, or
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. That's kind of what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I have gotten that impression before. We treat some physical things like as, their natural consequences of like being on this earth. Like if you lose your hand in an accident, like that's physical. Like I feel like hormones and like different things, like I'm not a scientist, but like different things in your mind that can affect you should be looked at the same way.
Addiction is like a mental health thing. So people will say, well, can't you just get over it? Like just stop doing that thing. But if it's an addiction, it's a lot more than that. And I think because we live in a world that has fallen, it's not the way God had initially intended it. But that doesn't mean that he can't use your struggle or your mental health struggle to help others or even yourself, if that makes sense. I mean, maybe he didn't intend for people to suffer from these disorders or these mental health issues, but but he still allows them to happen, doesn't change it, because he could still use it for other things and positive things. He could use anything for good, right?
Yeah.
And just because you're diagnosed with these things doesn't mean that you're gonna live the life that everybody says you have to live by having those diagnoses either. I don't take medication, but I go to therapy, and I've had a lot of other helpful things that have given me tools to live with these things, but they still affect me, and I still struggle, but I just don't struggle how some people might think that I should struggle. My sister, she was talking to me yesterday about her son, who's 2, and we were talking about how potentially he might also have something going on behaviorally, and she worries about getting him diagnosed because she worries about having him be labeled as something, right? So it's kind of the fear that we have in this world. Sometimes things are overdiagnosed, and sometimes they're underdiagnosed because we don't want to have that label.
Yeah, I think part of that is just we don't always know that much about other people's struggles that we haven't had, or we haven't experienced someone in our lives have that sort of thing. Like I've known someone with ADHD that they act more like you than more like the stereotype you presented. And so for me, like I get that, but I know there might be other conditions where I would have some sort of idea in my head of how people might act. So I think part of it is just being real and being open with those things so that more people are aware of the different ways people act and think and the different things we deal with like that.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting because we've taken this side road a little bit like mental health, and working with children or whatever. There is there are both sides of it. There's one camp that with young children, there's almost a badge of honor. The more diagnosis you can have on a kid or a person, then that kind of, oh man, my child, they have this, they have this, they have this. And you kind of look, and then there's other camp, which is, you know what, I don't want to get my son tested because they might have this diagnosis, and I don't want people to label them as something. Like, so I grew up as a youngster, so I'm old, but my mother taught special education here in Temple. And I used to, that's what all I've ever known is being in her classroom. But I also have gotten to see how dreadfully terrified parents would be. I don't want my son labeled as this. And like the movie scene, Forrest Gump, not to say go watch the movie, don't watch the movie, whatever. His mother, he has to get tested, and they realize that Forrest is he's right at the line of being diagnosed of whether back in the 60s, whether he would have had mental difficulties and have to go to the special class, or could he go to the regular class? And she says, my son will not be labeled. Is there anything we can do to figure out how to get these 2 extra little points higher? Because she said he's not going to be labeled by this. And then in it, she did a masterful job of him because he had braces on his leg. He didn't even realize that wasn't the norm. He wasn't going to live. She would not allow him to live in this definition. And he did it, it's just a movie, but he did it profoundly way to the other extreme where he didn't live by anybody else's definition. He was just him. He was not this. And you watch the character and you're like, oh, he's this, and he's this, and he's this. But he lived his life in such a way that he was just him. He was Forrest. And so for this, we come to, it's tough. So that we're in this room, we're sitting here, we're not children anymore. We have children of varying degrees, or we know children. We're adults, okay? And so with that comes the burden of, then you should be able to handle everything. Because we've already gone through our growing period. We've already gone through our formative time. We are now adults. We are mature, and everything should be just fine. And if it's not, then guess whose fault it possibly is, well, that's ours. And so not fair. And so I look at that, and then you say, is that as adults? So now we're looking as possibly and like ADHD, I look at some of these things, luckily, I would say that, and I don't mean that. I guarantee, if I grew up right now, I'd have been in the counselor's office and they would have diagnosed me without a shadow of a doubt with ADHD or whatever, something of that. My mind is never, ever staying in one place. Okay, so it's all, even as we sit here, I will go ahead and put it out there, it's 4 TV screens always going simultaneously. I sit there watching this, and this all at the same time. I'm watching stuff. So I know that, but it's normal. Like, I don't know that that's not how everybody's brain works. I don't know. I assume that is because that's how mine works. Okay, and so when I say things, everybody's like,
At least I've been told it's not.
dude, man, that's kind of weird. But I'm like, well, no, and always the same screens. I understand this screen, the second to the right is the one that's going on right now. This screen is another thing that I'm watching here, and the one on the left is something else I'm watching. Okay, so they're all going on, and I have to remind myself, this is what's really occurring. Stay on this one. This one over here is really not occurring, because I'm having another conversation over here. So
I think that's really interesting. So I would say that's not normal just because that's not how I experience things, but who's to say that there aren't more of you and less of me? But I do think that's really interesting to think that way. And it makes me think about like these things that we might say are disabilities or differences. They're actually really cool. And I could see how God would make people think differently because there's different benefits to having people that think differently from each other instead of all the same. And so I would say things like that aren't necessarily a bad thing.
okay, so like these things, there is some, so I'm not going to discount. There is mental health illnesses that are serious.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so like I'm just kind of referring to me, some of my idiosyncrasies, as I would say, and I'm defining myself. Okay, so like, but some of these little things that are slight nuances that are differences, you're going, man, that's what makes the world beautiful and different. And you go, man, that we're supposed to be all different. Now here in the line, where we would talk reality and such like that, I got many people that will serve today that I'm not a medical doctor, but probably are undiagnosed schizophrenic. Okay, they see stuff and they communicate and they have things that are 100% occurring to them that nobody else sees. They're really not there, but they really are there to them. And they'll have conversations and you're like, how in the world can you make it and make it well in this world when there's a whole other world existing inside your head that you don't understand, that everybody else doesn't see? And so like for me, like when Bobby, if I would explain this to me and to look at y'all's face, I'm like, why are they baffled by this? Everybody's world exists the exact same way as mine, but it doesn't. And you don't realize that until you realize that. And then I would say in the world, a lot of our people don't get the opportunity to realize that the reality is not really reality. So for me, I would say I have to remind myself, Jeff, the screen to the right is not real. That's not occurring in actual time. Okay, I could watch that and live in that, but it's not really occurring, you know? And so here, difficult. How is it, let's say, is it difficult to navigate life trying to figure out, well, like this, okay, what of these struggles do you have to embrace as it's just the way it is? And then how do you discern, I really need help with this? Okay, so Spencer, you said, I get therapy, I get some treatment. How do you come to the place to go and then that decision, my reality is really not reality. And this is not really my definition. I need some help with this.
Well, mine led to depression.
Okay.
So when my depression got really bad, I finally realized how it was affecting my kids and my relationship, and realized that I needed help at that point. So I went to a therapist and a psychologist, and that's when I had started that journey of diagnosis. And so, like I had said last time, I had always felt, like last podcast interview last week, I've always felt really different. I've always struggled with like depression on and off, and I had a lot of issues not feeling like I fit in, like I was kind of, I don't know how to explain it. I was kind of a hippie. I was kind of like, just different, I guess. Anyways, I didn't really understand any of that. But then finally, I just got so depressed that when I would look at my kids, I'd feel emotional about it. That sounds so terrible to say, but like specifically, my daughter was sad about something, and I looked at her crying, and I didn't feel sadness too. I just felt emptiness. And then I was like, oh no, I need to go see a doctor. I love my child very, very much. Why am I not connecting with her at this point, at this moment? And that's when I went to a doctor and started the journey of getting help. But Bobby and I talked about last time how like sometimes we all have this voice inside of us, and the Holy Spirit most likely, or God whispering to us, you know, this isn't who you are. This isn't what I planned for you. And some of us can't really hear that voice because the world and our minds and our illness or whatever it is we're struggling with is so loud. But there's been key moments in my life when I've heard that voice. There's been moments I heard it and ignored it. There's been moments I've heard it and argued with it. And then thankfully there's been moments I've heard it and listened. And that was one of those moments when I was like, this isn't meant for me. This isn't what God intended for me. So I went and I got help. But that doesn't mean that I just went to a therapist, got diagnosed, took some medicine, and was like, woohoo, I'm healed forever. Like, that was when, gosh, how long ago was that? Like 6 years ago, I think. My son was 1. Yeah. And it's been a really interesting journey since then. Highs and lows, ups and downs, and discovering myself in different ways. Ultimately not wanting to take medication anymore, deciding that I was going to figure it out without that. So yeah. Did I answer your question?
Not at all. I'm just kidding.
What are we talking about again? Where am I?
And like that, it like that. Well, you're right there. In that, and I would agree. So, and we're going to go back a little bit. I do believe wholeheartedly that we are designed differently, and that our true identity, like the one that we can come to truly in terms with, that brings us the most peace, is the only one of how we were designed to be by God. And out of that, well-intending, factors start influencing our definition from the minute we're born. And there'd be so many things we could look at, that, man, this is who you are based on all these things that occurred before, you were ever 18 months old. There's psychological premises that would go, you are pretty much defined by this period of life. Then there's another one by a preteen, and there's another one by all these things, that all these external factors define you. And you can't escape that definition. So there's some of those, I would disagree. I'm not anything to disagree on anything, but I would find it tragic to believe that everything my life is about and is going to be was simply because of environmental factors when I was, before I even conscious understood. Did my mom breastfeed me long enough or not long enough? Well, that's going to have an impact on me forever. Did I get enough I interaction now when I was, at certain ages. They would say some psychologically now is in the first 3 months. If you do not have enough visual stimulation with your child, there's going to be all these deficiencies that come out of that.
So maybe what's happening here is we're confusing our physical worldly identity with our spiritual
Okay.
self that God gave us. Because I still think we are all really individual and unique. Like he created us unique and individual, right? Like you have your gifts, you have your gifts, I have my gifts. So how do we decide, how do we like separate that from our sinful part of our identity?
Fair.
And
Okay.
like, cause I feel like our identity is in Christ and we are supposed to be one body, right? But that almost kind of makes it seem like none of us are unique. And I don't think that's true. I think we're all individual and unique. God created us, right? I mean, it says there's no one like you. He created you exactly like you, and you like you. So, if our identity is in Christ, what does that mean for our uniqueness? And how do we separate that from our sinful worldly identity? Because the way our physical brains work, like we take on information our whole lives in order to survive. Like in order to figure out our place in the world. That's like, we're like a computer taking on information. We're like AI, but human. So not like AI at all, but kind of like our brains are like computers. So we kind of need to take on some of this information to survive as a human in the world, but we don't need to completely like identify with it spiritually as in our soul. That's not who we are in there. That's not who God created us to be. That's just the information we've gathered from our surroundings to survive. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, how do you...
Yeah, I guess the way I think of it, I understand the difference I think that you're pointing out. I guess I view it as like what's important to how I view myself. So there are these things about me physically that are true, mentally, experientially that are true. But when I think about defining myself, I just think about what's important. Like, so I guess it's like where I find my worth, where I find my value, what's important, my self-confidence, things like that. But I think that is a good point, that they are different things. There's our spiritual identity and then our physical, we are in this world. So that's a good point.
Okay, so like that one, we would look, there's two different definitions of how we can live. Just because I want to do something doesn't mean that I can necessarily do it, because that may be this nature of me that is not good. Jeff has a selfish, sinful nature. So we're not saying here that just because I want to do something, that's how I'm made and I can go do it. Okay, so we're not saying that at all. And in it, and that we are, and I would agree, like you hear so much of at churches, one heart, one mind, one body. What does that mean? We're all the same. So you can listen to that and go, I don't fit in that
I
one.
would kind of disagree with
Okay.
that. I was thinking that when Spencer was talking also, and I don't know if this is what you were saying or just how I heard it. So God has so many different attributes, and so even if we are of one body and we're all these different parts and we have these different attributes that are all of God, but we have them differently and have these different talents and gifts. And so I've always thought of it as like one body, like we're all different because all the parts of our body are different.
Fair.
Like,
Yeah, makes sense.
Not fair.
but even like our different roles, like even as men and women, like I feel like there are different attributes that are all found in God. He just doesn't give them all to us, or else we would be God too. We have these different parts of Him and ourselves that are all different.
No, fair enough. And I would agree with that. Like you can hear these things, and it's not like the body is made up of like my own body and everybody. There's a bunch of cells, there's a bunch of organs, there's a whole lot of individual things that must function as they function. Even on the molecular cellular level, this type of cell within my body must function this way. Antibodies must function this way. Red blood cells must function in this way. That's how they were created. So just because they are different, they have a different purpose to sustain life. And then out of that, you would look and say, well, Jeff has one body, he has one mind, but there's a whole lot that makes that up. And not even like you can go base, a pinky was different than a thumb. Okay, I get it. But even further down from that, there's so much stuff that what makes up a pinky. How does it work? How do the nerves work? How do the cells work? There's so much that makes up this body of believers that comes together. And then what I find intriguing to me out of all of this is we can get that and we can look and we go, man, I get it. That, man, we're supposed to be all of these things and we're different and we're all of this, okay? And we're going to talk about how easy is it to live in a world and truly embrace that you may not be the same as everybody else. Because our world seems to be all about society. You have to fit in. And to fit in, you have to be like everybody else. And what if you're not like everybody else? Then we have to come to definitions of ourselves. Like Spencer said, she goes, well, I just realized finally that I was just different. And then we say it in such a way that initially it can be hard. I just don't fit in like everybody else. I'm just different. And it can kind of look difficult and hard, and it's a difficult world to possibly navigate. I'm not like everybody else, but even though everybody's not like everybody else, so it's such a bizarre circle that we're left running in, is I've got to be like everybody else, but nobody's like everybody else, and nobody truly fits into this everybody else model. And then when you finally have a cognizant reality of that, then you realize, I guess I'm just different than everybody else. And sort of in a negative connotation initially, I'm just different. Meaning I'll never fit in. I won't quite have a place at the table like everybody else. I'm always going to be at the little kid table. Like all us old people, like when you go to the family meal, you'd have the big people table and then the kids would sit at a separate table. In Louisiana, I don't know how we do it here in Texas. Everybody sat at our same table, but you would go little kids over here and the big kids over here. So tell me on that, how easy is it to live in that?
I think, man, I just blanked. I had a thought while you were talking, but you took so long asking the question.
Fair enough.
So,
I think that's what's happening to me too. I think it's just how much you're talking.
Okay, then I'm quiet now. No, I'm let it rip.
So the question was, how easy is it to live when we think that way, when we feel like we're different or we don't fit in? I think that is one of the most consequential, in a negative way, ways that we can think is that we don't fit in, because God designed us to fit in. He does describe us as the body. He made us for community the way He has community with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's what we were designed for. And so many negative things come out of feeling like you don't belong and feeling isolated. Something as simple as hiding your sin, which I think we can all fall victim to. Like, we're not being open, we're not being seen, we're allowing things to control us when we allow ourselves to be isolated and to keep things bottled in. So I think the lack of community that comes with thinking that way causes so many problems, anger, depression, and they can spiral into some of the even worse things that we see in society, just from that feeling like you don't belong, like you're not part of a community. So to answer quicker, it's difficult if that's how you think. I think it's really hard to live that way. I've been there before. I think all of us have at some point, and it's lonely and it's not fun.
Well, it's easy to get there. It's easy to have that thought. Well, at least it's easy for me. I've always felt that way. But then once you're living that way, it's not an easy life. It's pretty easy to get there. The enemy has a good way of making everybody feel isolated and not fit in. He's
Oh, I did not get the free friends.
from everything from like the way you look, to what you like, to what you believe. So many different things. Social media is a big one. That's one I struggle with a lot.
Get this thing.
And I would agree, and it's interesting, because then this will be, well, not hoping we're gonna end up anywhere, but we've all come to a place here in agreement. We're very different, even sitting in this room. I mean, I would feel very certain that we are not the same
You
individual.
won't have a
Okay, and so we'd go, I'm fine with that. But Bobby said there, that, you know what, we're made to live in community. That's in interaction and belonging with others. Okay, and there's good community and there's negative community, but we're made to live in that, and we search that out. Okay, and I would say here, and I will come back to it again and again, at the Feed My Sheep line, the number one thing that the people have in common here is lack of community or belonging. This isolation that I don't fit in anywhere in the world. Nobody cares about me. I belong here. And then we would say, I don't belong here. And so I would say this lack of community, like I don't belong. I don't fit in.
Well, that's what tends to lead somebody into making some not so healthy choices for themselves.
That's right.
Like that's what happened to me, at least when I was a teenager. And I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. I started hanging out with people that also felt like they didn't fit in, like a little group of outcasts. And then when all these people get together and you start feeling like they're accepting you and your differences, and you start to do the things that you probably shouldn't do to fit in with them too. At least that's what I did.
Yeah. It is interesting. So like, when we try to live out of a definition that is not us, we're not made to live in isolation.
Agreed.
Okay, and so I mean, we can look, I mean, if we wanted to go down that trail, you can look at some of the horrific experiments the Germans did during World War II on people, and they discovered, not just in the Holocaust and all of that stuff, but they did psychological experiments on kids that were horrific. And they realized that it is sustaining of life, you must have contact with people. And kids would die through their experiments, and the only thing they were lacking is any interaction with anything from the outside world. None. They had zero. They had all the food they needed, they had all the water they needed, they had vitamins, they had everything that would sustain life, but yet they withered and they died very shortly. Okay, terrible experiment. And then I would say, as a society, this longing for community and belonging, okay, sometimes, I don't think our need for it has disappeared any at all, none, zero. We still have it, it's huge. And then sometimes when we are struggling with our mental health and wellness, our first inkling is to isolate ourselves and get away from everybody. Okay? And so then out of that, if we would look at how the world is and how we are designed, we would then have to at some point acknowledge, this is not how I was called to live. This is not good for me. And then, like what Spencer did, then you have to realize at some point, if you're in that, this is not the reality I was called to live in. And ready, I'll ask this, Spencer, is it a sign of weakness to reach out and say, I need help when these struggles are occurring?
No. Quite the opposite, actually. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. Somebody that I know is pregnant and she has her own struggles, and she was mentioning that she wanted to just be able to do everything on her own and not have to need help at all. And I was like, and she wanted to be tough and strong and brave. And I said, we need community, especially as mothers. And the bravest, toughest thing you can possibly do for yourself and your baby is to ask for help. And I could definitely say that that's true for me. And then when you have made those decisions that you feel like shame about, it's really hard to reach out because you think they're gonna judge you, and then you believe. You know, for example, before I became a Christian, I was like, nobody is gonna like me in that church once they find out all the things I've done and seen and said, and they're just gonna judge me, and I'm not gonna be accepted. Even coming here today, I was worried that I wouldn't have anything good to say, and I didn't belong here. Like, why would I go talk on a podcast about God and mental health? Like, I don't have any answers for any of this. I don't even know really what I'm talking about. Been very anxious about this. So when you're struggling and then you want help or you need to talk to somebody else about it, it's really, really hard. And it's the bravest thing you can do for yourself. And that's one the enemy really likes to get in your head. Which we just did a Bible study called Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at Your Table. Have you heard of that?
Sounds familiar.
It's a really good one. I suggest it. But I will be honest, I didn't finish it. I did the first and then the last. Just throw that out there.
So you recommend the first and the last episode? Or
I
the
recommend
lesson?
doing the whole thing.
Okay.
I missed it. It was with my group, and I was out of town for a couple weeks. So,
So you're safe
my
at that.
husband and I are gonna go back and do the whole thing. Maybe we're gonna try.
But at the table, you're safe at the appetizer and the dessert, but the
Yeah.
meal, I don't know how we're gonna
Actually,
handle that one so
yeah.
much.
Good luck.
Yeah, but like out of this, to come to a final resting place, if you're out there listening, hey, we're just talking. Okay, so we're not solving anything here, but what Spencer just said is a good stopping off point. If you yourself are going, man, I'm not sure this is the reality that I was called to live in, but I don't know what to do. It's all right to say, but I do know I need help.
And I will say that there's nothing wrong with getting medical help.
Nothing at all.
And I know that some people are worried that that is not from God, but I disagree. And I think that God puts people in our lives medically, therapeutically, to help us. Like if, for example, if you needed to take medication for something like depression, those are answers out there. You just have to figure out what's individually for you and what will work for you and your body and your struggle personally. But it's not I don't know, I just wanted to say that for some reason.
Agreed, because we can also, in this topic, because we're just talking, and sometimes it's too easy to be too callous and go,
Mom.
you're just not good enough, or whatever religious, we're not saying that. I would acknowledge that in this we must state the fact, the obvious one, that mental health issues are medical diagnosis. These are illnesses the same as the flu. This is an illness, okay?
Yeah.
I do not choose it. I can become ill, okay? And so we would look at that and out of these things and not to go, that's where I would believe theologically. I do believe doctors in the mental health profession, they can be used by God and they can do beneficial things. I do not think it's solely a theological issue, and it's not so that to put that platform out there. But I'm glad we did come to out of that and to look here in this. The discussion is simply, I would say that the mental health topic is the number one thing that's struggling with the people that we serve every day at Feed My Sheep. And out of that comes the addiction, all that stuff. Okay. I would also say in the society that we face every day, I would say that's one of the major topics at hand as well.
There's also a program at my church, Vista Church, that you can go through called Recovery.
Mhm.
It's not Celebrate Recovery.
No,
I think
Vista
it's
Recovery.
just called Recovery. You guys interviewed Brent
Mhm.
one time.
That's right.
My husband, he went to that program for his own personal reasons, and now he co-hosted as well recently. They're about to graduate, but it helps with everything from alcohol, porn addiction, but even things like grief or like perfectionism, just anything. And I myself am planning on signing up for the next 6 months just for my own anxiety and like other kinds of things I deal with. But they're about to have a graduation, and I think they're gonna open up again in the fall.
They
So
are.
if you put like a link for people if they were interested, it's free
Yeah, we can do that.
and it's a really cool thing you could go. And they have childcare as well.
And then for a shout out for Brent and the Vista Care program, I've gone and I've seen it, I've been there, and to think of its value and worth, that is one of the programs we're gonna bring over to the Sunrise Center. So Vista Care is
yay.
gonna have a Wednesday evening, starting in the fall, when they start up again over here.
Cool.
Its value and its worth, for sure, are coming in, because it's a lot of fronts that they discuss and they talk about a whole lot of stuff.
And you create and build a healthy community
That's right.
of people that are also struggling. So you don't feel like you have to be perfect or you have to hide your struggles. So
And that's a good place to end on that. So out there, we are gonna simply, out of this, you'd hear this simple thing, that struggles and feelings of inadequacy and that I don't fit in, they're quite normal in human beings. Everybody who's up here talking has the same things. Desire for community, it is very much normal. And then out of all of these things, if you're sitting there and you're going, my reality is just not where it should be, there is help. There are answers out there. And I would encourage you, if nothing else out of this, to go, hey, maybe I need to look at getting some help, because this is not the definition I want to live out my life as. It was not the one that was written from the beginning of time, and this is not life abundantly, how I'm living. So, if out of that, Spencer, you did not overshare too much
I
today.
think I was actually more quiet than
You're
I
more
thought.
reserved
I was
today.
trying, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
have to come back a third time.
I was self-conscious. I was like, ah.
She was reserved on this, but and then in this, and it should be, and then we will continue. It's just a discussion. We're just talking, and we'll look at that. And I'm going to put some heat on it. I can't wait to see various forms of art or whatever you would do for the summer art show, and love to have you at some. Not, and I know you said at the last one you hate it when people ask. I'm not asking for any piece. I don't even know what it is, but I'm looking forward to that, and painting beautiful pictures. That's all this is. We're just helping paint, and maybe this one help giving you some tools to go, hey, this is a beautiful picture, and life is a beautiful picture. It really is. It can get so confusing, but it is a beautiful, beautiful, complex picture that we live every day. So, appreciate you being here, Spencer. We're gonna give a shout out to Olivia and her son Bob, whose actual name is Sean. So I just said that to irritate him. And then we
My kids
also
are
have
here.
Bobby. So we appreciate y'all being here. We do say every time that what we do and what we're about here is we do believe people matter. It's as simple as that, and we think that because God says that. And so we would say finally that you are a person, whether you feel that or not, it is the truth, and then out of that truth is the definition of that you matter. And you do matter. And so we live at that, and I hope your reality, it matches up with your true definition. So that is that. Done.
The Collage Podcast is produced by Bobby Jeffers in association with Feed My Sheep. Hosts are Jeff Stiegel, Karen Smith, Jonah Fox, and myself, Roy Rhodes. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on whatever platform you're listening. Or like, share, subscribe, and get in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you, so shoot us an email at digitalmedia@feedmysheeptemple.org. And may you be nourished for your journey with God.